Hello everybody. This is my Epson Apex Plus. You guys have seen this computer a few times over the history of the channel. This is my Turbo XT system from 1988. And as a lot of you know, this is the dearest of all my vintage computers. I'm lucky enough to own an extensive collection of vintage computers spanning multiple eras and architectures. But if I had to get rid of all of it and keep just one machine, it would be this guy right here. This computer is my favorite. Not only from a technological standpoint, but also from a sentimental standpoint. This computer belonged to my high school math teacher, somebody who I really liked and highly respected. And he bought the machine new, and for the last several years of its original life, it lived in his classroom at my high school. In 2011, he gave it to me when he found out that I loved vintage computers. And I've made it my duty ever since to keep this computer in as good shape as possible and to just enjoy it as much as possible more than anything. I've done an extensive number of upgrades to this computer. I think I've upgraded this computer more than any computer I've owned. I replaced the original clone 8088 microprocessor with an NEC V20. That's a drop-in 8088 compatible CPU that is not only faster clock for clock than the 8088, but it's also partially 286 compatible. It has the 8286 instruction set. It only lacks the protected memory mode. So some software that needs a 286 will run on this computer or any computer with an NEC V20 as long as it doesn't require the protected memory mode, if it only needs the instructions. That's pretty cool. It's got 640K of RAM. I got it that way. I've upgraded it with a Seng ET4000AX Super VGA video card. Absolutely overkill 386 or 486 era video card for this thing, but it lets me use VGA monitors, which is important because that's all I have. I put a Sound Blaster Pro compatible sound card in it, which is pretty sweet. And I put an XT IDE card in it with a 160 megabyte IDE hard drive. And this computer has been configured this way for the last several years until very recently. I made one change. I took the XT IDE card and the IDE hard drive out. In fact, I've got the XT IDE card right here, and the IDE hard drive caddy, which is this guy, I took out, and I put in its place the original 5 1/4 inch floppy disk drive back in. Why did I do this? Well, in today's video, I'm going to tell a really cool story of something I managed to do with this computer. And I'm telling this story a year and a half late. I did what I'm going to describe today a year and a half ago. It's just taken me this long to finally want to make a video about it. So let's go back to 2011 when I first met this computer in my math teacher's classroom. The first time I ever used this computer, it worked perfectly. It turned on, it booted up using its original 20 megabyte MFM hard drive. And it booted into DOS and some sort of locked down DOS menu interface that my math teacher had put on it however many years ago. But one day later in that school year, I went to turn it on and it did not boot up. It did a post, it checked the floppy drives for a disk, and then it said no boot device found. And I listened for the hard drive, and the hard drive wasn't spinning anymore. And when I informed my math teacher about this, he said, well, you like the computer so much, why don't you have it? Maybe you can fix it. and continue to have fun with it. And I took the machine home with a malfunctioning hard drive, except I discovered something really weird. When I turned the computer on, the hard drive would spin up, it wouldn't reach full speed, and then it would spin back down and that would be it. But if I let the computer sit for several minutes, turned it off, and then turned it back on, the hard drive would spin up to full speed, do a seek test, and it would boot and work perfectly. But if I let it sit turned off for more than a few minutes, next time I turned it on, it wouldn't spin up anymore. It would spin up to partial speed and then spin back down. Very weird behavior. And I spent the next decade scratching my head wondering what was wrong with this hard drive. For many years I used the computer as a floppy only machine, which meant I didn't use it very much at all, because being a floppy only machine it makes things very limited. Not terribly limited on an XT machine, but still limited nonetheless. Also at this same time I was having issues with the VGA video card I had in it at the time, and those were solved with the Sang ET4000AX. But for a decade I scratched my head with this MFM hard drive. It's a Kyocera KC-20B hard drive, 20 megabyte hard drive on a knockoff hard card. The drive and the Western Digital WD1004A WX1 MFM controller were all on a full-length ISA card. As a little aside, Westlife recently made a video about the real hard card, the one that all of the cheap knockoffs, like the one that was in this computer, were trying to imitate. Really cool video, you should check it out. But I had no idea why this hard drive was acting this way. And when I first met the computer, it didn't. But just a few months after I met it, it started doing it. My first thought, the first idea that I formulated a long time ago, was that there was some friction in the spindle motor, dry bearings that had to be oiled. But I was not confident enough to open up the drive to try and see if I could even attempt to oil the spindle motor. I came up with other hypotheses at the time, which were just bonkers and unfounded. I saw another video of a KC-20B, and the spindle motor sounded different, and I thought, well, maybe the drive is spinning up fast enough, but it's trying to spin up too fast, and it was all wrong. I was just grasping at straws because I had no idea what could be wrong. A few years ago, I recapped the drive. I thought, well, maybe it's bad capacitors. So I actually recapped the drive. The thing has new capacitors in it now, which is great. It sure as heck doesn't hurt, for sure. But it didn't fix that problem. And so back in the late 2010s or mid 2010s, I don't remember anymore, I got the XT IDE card. Someone sent me the caddy that could fit in the 5 1/4 inch bay, and I was happy as a clam using this thing with a nice big IDE hard drive that was fast and could handle as much software as I cared to throw at the machine. But I still always wondered, but I kind of just gave up. Finally, in 2021, I decided to do one last thing that was either going to somehow fix the drive, or it was going to give it a hell of a send-off. I was going to disassemble the drive, open it up, disassemble it. And when I say disassemble, I mean remove platters and the motor and everything by hand. And I was going to either fruitlessly try and oil the drive motor, and then probably not put the drive back together correctly, or I was just going to destroy it immediately in the process of disassembling it. So here's how that went. I took the cover off the drive, I donned some latex gloves, and I took a screwdriver. I took the spindle cap retainer thing off that keeps the platters in place, and using my bare hands on my living room desk, donned with only latex gloves and some tissues to put them on, I picked up the platters with my fingers, and I set them on the tissues that I had laid out. Any modern hard drive, this would be instant destruction. An old MFM hard drive, a little more robust for stuff like this, but still not something you would expect any hard drive of any age to survive, except possibly in a clean room with people who knew what they were actually doing. I took the platters out of the drive, and what that left me with was the spindle motor, which had 3 screws holding it to the chassis of the drive, the case of the drive. And I removed these screws, and I tried with my thumbs to push the motor out, but it was pretty much locked in place. I couldn't get the motor out. I couldn't figure out, where, if anywhere, to put oil. I mean, hard drive motors are generally very sealed, even hard drives of this era, so I just didn't find a place to oil the motor. So I had my fun. By the way, I didn't remove the head assembly. I removed the platters by basically lifting them up and bending the head arms a little bit, and then pulling them out with the heads still like pressing against them. Ooh, that was good for them, I'm sure. And I put them back together the same way. I used one hand to pry the 2 heads apart and the other hand to put the platters back in, 2 platters in this drive. And I put it all back together. I just put the drive all back together, and when I got it all back together, I looked over and I saw 3 screws sitting on the desk. Oops, I forgot to put the spindle motor retaining screws back in. So now the spindle motor is just being held in by friction, which isn't a horrible thing because, as you recall, there was so much friction that I couldn't actually press the spindle motor out. So I put the drive all back together, and I thought, well, I've definitely destroyed this drive by removing the platters by hand, not removing the head assembly. But what the hell, this drive's definitely garbage now. Let's power it on one last time, see if it makes any crazy sounds. I plugged the hard drive into a power supply and powered it on. And it spun up. And it finished spinning up, and it did a seek test. It was working fine. And I was just blown away. And I don't know exactly what happened, but I have a pretty good guess at what ailed this Kyocera KC-20B hard drive for years. And I have a feeling what I did to fix it. I think the reason the motor struggled to spin up when the drive was cold was because over the decades the case had warped just enough that it was causing a shear force or some sort of twisting force on the spindle motor, which was causing some rotational friction, and it could not overcome that friction and spin up. Once the drive was warm, the metal shifted and de-warped just enough for the motor to overcome that friction. By taking out the spindle motor retaining screws and forgetting to put them back in, I relieved the spindle motor of that force. And the drive worked perfectly as a result, And it's still working perfectly. The reason I've removed the XT IDE card and the IDE hard drive is because the drive has just been working perfectly ever since I did that. And so I put it back into the computer, and I'm using the computer with this drive now that I removed the platters on by hand and put them on a computer desk on some Kleenex. I'm blown away at what kind of luck I had to have had to fix my hard drive in such a crazy manner. So the hard drive continues to work. Now, I did leave one little detail out. I'll explain that now. What actually happened the first time I powered on that drive after I put it back together was it spun up, it finished spinning up, and it tried to do a seek test, but the heads were just swinging back and forth between the two extremes of the disk. It just seeked over and over and over, and it never stopped. And I correctly guessed that this was because when I put the two platters back in, when I took them out, I made no mental record of how they were aligned. I knew which way up they went, but I didn't know if they were aligned rotationally. And so when I put them back in, I just put them in. And I figured there was some sort of rotational alignment that the drive relied on to complete its seek test. So what I did was I took the drive back apart, made the choice to still leave the spindle motor retaining screws out, and I took the upper platter and I noticed that there was some writing, like actual handwriting on the inside of the like the innermost ring of each platter. And each platter had the same handwriting. So I installed the upper platter so that the writing aligned with the writing on the lower platter, and that fixed it, and the drive works, and it has worked ever since. I have expected the drive to have some sort of issue because of what I did. It's been perfect. I low-level formatted it. 0 bad sectors. 0. The drive came from the factory with no bad sectors. It has the factory defect list, and it's blank. And it still has no bad sectors on it. It's incredible. And I've been just using it, the drive, for the past week in the computer. It's just been perfect. I don't know how else to emphasize. It's been working fine, and I'm super happy because this is my only MFM hard drive. It's my only stepper motor hard drive. It's the original hard drive to the computer, and I'm super excited that an original part of this computer is working again, and I can put it back in this computer. And you guys know I love vintage hard drives. I've got a giant box of IDE hard drives sitting under there, about 30 IDE hard drives. I'm probably good for mechanical IDE hard drives for the rest of my life across all my computers, which is great. But I only have the one MFM hard drive and the one stepper motor based hard drive. So I'm really happy to get it working. You know, if money were no object, I would have bought some other MFM hard drive to put in its place years ago, but I refused to pay eBay prices for something like that. So this is a joyous occasion, this computer's original hard drive back in the computer and working. And so that's the story that I've waited a year and a half to tell you guys. So, without further ado, how's about we demonstrate this computer for the first time ever with its original hard drive properly working. Alright, here's us. And you better believe I got the hard drive mic'd up. That's your ear right there listening in through the vent. So, let's boot this thing up. Such a sweet sounding drive, the Kyocera KC-20B. I think it's one of the coolest sounding MFM hard drives. The infamous K-Lock Octagon sounds similar. The KC-20B even looks similar to the K-Lock Octagon. Alright, so there's a few things going on. I've got the Microsoft mouse driver, some stuff for the ES1868F video card, or a sound card rather, to basically, you know, turn on compatibility for Sound Blaster. And then there's the actual Sound Blaster Pro driver, which is none the wiser that it's running on a system fitted with something that's not actually a Sound Blaster. So, let's see, what can I run on here? So, what I've done presently is, of course, when I had the IDE hard drive in this thing, I had MS-DOS 5 installed, Windows 3.0, I had so much stuff. But of course, the challenge now, as much as I love having the original hard drive back in this computer, the challenge is that only 20 megabytes, you know, today in a world of easily available abandonware, you can fill up 20 megabytes pretty easily on an XT. So I don't have very much installed right now. I actually, to save on space, I've actually installed MS-DOS 3.2 from the original Epson install discs, which I got with this computer. I do not have Windows installed. I don't really have much of anything installed. I've got ZSoft Paintbrush installed, so we can open that. Let's do that. Oops. Oh, that's a directory. Then it's Paint. And there's that. I think that's the end of the hard drive activity. As you can tell, this is actually the Microsoft branded version, Microsoft Paintbrush 4.0. Was the last version of ZSoft Paintbrush, and as you can probably tell right away, it's pretty demanding for an XT system. It's actually probably not that demanding if you have a CGA or EGA video card, but when you have a VGA video card, as in this system, it becomes a bit more demanding because there's more screen to draw, there's more colors to have to draw. So yeah, but that's a pretty nice example of putting the hard drive to work. Okay, what else do we got? All I really have left that's currently installed is, I think I still have the Sound Blaster. Let's see. Oops. Okay, this is the... Yeah. I don't think this is what I want. actually, there was a really cool song that came with the Sound Blaster Pro driver. It was, oh, Star FM, a ripoff of the Star Wars theme. Yeah, I just discovered that yesterday, and it was, I was like, wow, that's actually a really nice, legally distinct ripoff of the Star Wars theme. So the next thing I'm going to demonstrate, I do have Check It installed on here, which of course has some hard drive tests. So it's going track to track doing a linear read test right now. I'll spare you waiting for this and having to listen to tick tock, tick tock. Here comes the butterfly read test. Here comes the random read. Check It's random read test is not as exciting as SpinRite's or other software, and the reason for that is because for Check It, every time the drive seeks to a cylinder, it checks every head on the drive before it seeks to the next cylinder, the next random cylinder. And so, unlike other random seek tests where it goes to a random cylinder and a random singular head, Check It goes to a random cylinder and checks all the heads. So it's not quite as frantic, you can hear. Still very pleasant to listen to though. And once again, no bad sectors. Pretty cool. I now have SpinRite on this, SpinRite 2 version 2.0, so let's run that. Did you remember to boot a clean system from a floppy disk? No, I didn't. Alright. I don't know how to use an early version of SpinRite. That's a manual. Now that's what I'm talking about. Man, this drive sounds so cool. I never get tired of that sound. So that's the story on how I fixed the original hard drive to my favorite vintage computer in a final ditch effort that I fully expected to just completely destroy the drive. And I am so tickled that this hard drive is now working as it should. And I'm super excited to continue using the Epson Apex Plus and rebuild the software library on it. Now, there is one more thing, and a thing that's actually gonna involve making another video on this topic. I talked about how going from a 160 megabyte IDE drive to a 20 megabyte MFM drive, that's quite the compromise in terms of hard drive space, and it's gonna make it hard for me to install all the software that I want to install on this. I've already had to make concessions, such as going from installing MS-DOS 3.2 instead of 5. I'm considering not reinstalling Windows 3.0 at all, and a lot of other things. But there are things that I can do that don't involve having to stop using the original MFM drive. I could keep using the XT IDE card in conjunction with the MFM drive. However, I wouldn't do so using the same mechanical hard drive for a couple of reasons. First of all, the power supply in this computer is only 85 watts. I don't want to load it with having to run two hard drives. The other thing is I want the MFM drive to be the only mechanical drive in the system, the only drive that's actually heard. So if I need to use the XT IDE for extra space, I would attach a compact flash card to it. I have the perfect compact flash card. It's a 128 megabyte card. But there is something else I could do that would possibly allow me to not have to use the XT IDE card. I'll explain this in more detail in the next video I'm going to do. But back in the day, there were actually, we talk about MFM hard drives, but there were actually two types of those hard drives. There were MFM hard drives, and then there were RLL hard drives, which are exactly the same as MFM. The cabling's the same, and the drive is physically the same, but the encoding scheme is different. And an RLL hard drive has 50% more capacity than the equivalent MFM hard drive. Now, back in the day, you could buy an MFM hard drive or you could buy an RLL hard drive, and you had to buy either an MFM controller or an RLL controller to go with it. But you can format MFM hard drives as RLL using an RLL controller. And depending on the quality of the drive and the health of the drive, it can work just fine. And if it does work, you get a 50% capacity increase. A 20 megabyte MFM hard drive becomes a 30 megabyte RLL hard drive. And so what I've done is I've gone on eBay and I have purchased an RLL hard drive controller, and I'm waiting for it to come in. And you better believe I'm going to see if this hard drive will take being formatted as an RLL drive, get an extra 10 megabytes out of it. If it works, that would be pretty cool. It's totally safe to do. If it ends up not working, I just put the MFM controller back in and happily low-level format the drive again and happily continue using it as an MFM drive. But that's a little experiment that we're gonna do in another video. So until then, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Really happy to get to show you guys a pretty prideful accomplishment, I think, of getting this computer's original hard drive working properly again after a decade. I love it so much, and I love this computer. So there you go. More to come with the Epson Apex Plus. I hope you'll join me then. Until then, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.